Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast. My name is Jessica. I'm today sitting with two incredible people who are deeply embedded in the fabric of Washington State. Our former Bellevue council member, Conrad and the founder of Let's Go Washington, Brian Heywood. So we're today having a conversation on one of the hottest and the most important topic, the state income tax. Before we dive into the topic, I want to ask you a very simple question. How many years have each of you lived in Washington State? Can we start from Conrad?
Thank you. I've lived in Washington since 1962. When I graduated from University of Michigan, I came to work for Boeing. And so I've lived ever since, and I moved to Bellevue specifically in 1968 because I love the place. It's a good place for raising families and a place that, there's a lot of opportunities. And most of the people that work for Boeing, for University of Washington, the biggest employee at that time in the state, and they live in Bellevue. So we are considered a bedroom community. So I love this place. I have raised a family, I have a son and a daughter, and they both will graduate from Bellevue High School, and they went on to college. And one of them and two granddaughters are living here. And my daughter is working at Indiana University, but she's considering coming back. So with one granddaughter, additional one. So this is my home, and this is my home for my future generations. So I am looking forward to continue to do so, but we want to make sure that it's going to be as good as it was for me, if not better, as it was for our future generations.
Sure. How about you, Brian?
I brought my company. We moved here from California in 2010. And I brought 40 families from California. They all moved up here. We thought we were going to lose some of the admins because their husbands had jobs in California. And all of our admins convinced their husbands to quit and find a job up here in Washington State. So we brought, like I said, 40 families. In 2010, I raised my kids mostly here in Washington. They finished all their their high school, and they all graduated from Redmond schools. And then for me, actually, personally, my family moved a lot when I was a kid. We were not very wealthy. But and then I lived in Asia for quite some time. And I've never lived anywhere as long as I've lived here. So I've been here almost 16 years. So for me, this is the longest I've lived in any one place ever. And I sort of thought California would be that, but I saw in California regulations, taxes, increased cost of living, just beating up businesses. And so we moved to try to get away from that. And it seems like in the last 5 years, it's kind of crept into Washington State.
I totally agree. As for me, ever since I immigrated to United States, I lived in Washington State, lived in this place. And I started my career, my family here. All three of my children were born here.
Oh, okay.
So I call this place my home. And I totally agree. In the last few years, especially like last 2 or 5 years, the cost of living here is, skyrocketing. Like it's so costly. Lots of people, especially for the working families, they're talking it's hard to afford living here. And what I know is like we have the highest gas price. Some of the, maybe not the top one, but maybe top 2 or top 3 among the whole nation. And we have some of the highest sales tax. Mm-hmm. Yes. And on top of that, we have capital gains tax. We have B&O tax. And now we're facing the new income tax. So many people tell me it's like a breaking point for them with all these taxes. And some of the people like us, they lived here for so long. It's very sad for them to thinking about packing up and leaving. So, Brian, I want to bring you in here, from here, saying, everybody is talking about income tax, but it's very controversial topic. Your organization and you on the front line, I think many people, same as you, are talking this income tax is unconstitutional.
Right.
It's directly against the Washington State legal foundation. Would you please break down some to our listeners why it's unconstitutional?
Washington State has a fantastic constitution. I think it's actually one of the best in the United States. It's very, very protective of the citizens, and it's also very anti-tax. There's a lot of pieces in our Constitution that protect people from taxes. One of those is, it says very clearly that all anything that you have is sort of tangible and intangible. Things you can touch, things you can't, that's your property. It defines that as property. And then it says you can only make a tax on property of a maximum 1%, and it has to be applied the same for everybody.
It's uniform.
It's uniform. So everybody pays the same and everything. And that's, the Supreme Court has ruled on this 8 times, that there's been several challenges to the income tax. 8 times the Supreme Court has ruled against any deviation from a flat 1% max on everybody. That's the only way that our Constitution allows it. And so that's the rule. And what I think they tried to do this time in the legislature is to, their goal, not I think, I know, because they were writing letters to the Attorney General. And that to me is part of the dirty thing that's going on here. The legislator, Senator Jamie Peterson, wrote letters to the Attorney General's office, and he said, I want to force the Supreme Court to change this. So what do I need to do to get the Supreme Court so they will change their mind? And so that's one piece of it. The second thing, then the Attorney General told them, and I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit here of our Constitution, but the Attorney General told them, well, you need to add a necessity clause into the law, into the new income tax, right? And what is the necessity clause? In our Constitution, there's something that was actually, it's normally called the emergency clause. And so what the emergency clause says is when Olympia makes a law, the citizens have a right to do a referendum, which is easy. It's easier, not easy, it's easier. It's 200,000 signatures, and it's vote no to vote no. In other words, if they voted for an income tax, then you vote, do you want the income tax? Vote yes. If you hate the income tax, vote no. So that's easy. We also have an initiative process. The initiative process is 400,000 signatures, roughly, you need to gather, and it's vote yes to vote no. Right? And so it's more confusing and people don't always understand it. And so the Attorney General was advising the legislature, you need to put in this emergency clause. Now let's go back to the emergency clause. What the emergency clause says is when they pass a law, sometimes Olympia can say, this is an emergency. There's a public health problem, a public safety problem, a public peace problem. And there's a comma there's a comma that says, for the needs of running the state. Most people interpret that as an emergency health, emergency peace, emergency safety, emergency running the state. With this little comma here. And this is very nerdy. This is very in the weeds. But what's happened is a couple of years ago, the Supreme Court said, we think that the people that wrote the Constitution originally forgot to put in or for running the state. So it's not in the Constitution, but they have inserted the meaning of that into the law. And this will go a little bit to what we challenged it. As soon as they passed the law, we filed a referendum. And the Secretary of State said, I'm not even going to look at your referendum because there's this necessity clause, not an emergency clause, but they've created a new necessity clause. And so we challenged that and we took it to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, yes, we've ruled on this in different ways several times. And so we're going to reject your claim on a referendum. Now, I think this is a very, very big problem because if you read the Constitution, it's very clear that the people that wrote it did not want to give a lot of power to the legislature. Only in rare instances could they use this. And what the Supreme Court has now said, and the legislature is claiming, is that when it comes to any tax, you can never do a referendum on a tax because it's necessary for running the state. I believe that the Supreme Court ruled wrongly on that. That they can rule, so they're the Supreme Court, so I can't change that. But I think there's two ways that things are being done unconstitutionally, I believe. One is very clear that this income tax is a 9.9% income tax. And it's a broad income tax. The way they've written it is, it's not only on rich people, it's a 9.9% tax on everybody, but you get a deduction of $1 million, right? And that's how they're trying to get around this rule. So that's I think that in itself is unconstitutional. And then I believe the Supreme Court has acted in a non-constitutional way to stop, to prevent, to rule against any kind of referendum on any tax. And I believe that, so that's the foundation of what we think is part. There's more, but that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I do believe for this kind of very important issue, the voters should have the voice on it. So what they're doing is trying to prevent people have a voice on it. That's kind of bad. And as you mentioned, this income tax bill, they promoted it as a millionaire tax bill.
Right.
It's actually will affect everybody. It's a state income tax with $1 million exception.
For now.
Yeah, for now. And for the future, the bar possible will lower.